that is struck, or anything that imitates or replaces those sounds. Even if it was initially a halal sound, you mixed it up and it became a haram sound. Some people then, when you ask them, is music halal, they compare it to instances in which the Sahaba sang. And wallahi, this is unbelievably unfair. So you ask someone, is music halal? A young man asks the Shaykh, is music halal? What is he thinking? He's thinking MTV, VH1, what have you. And the Shaykh says, wallahi, the Sahaba sang. When they were building the ditch, digging the ditch in Al-Khandaq, they were singing as they were working. And they sang, طَلَعَ الْبَدْرُ عَلَيْنَا, when the Prophet ﷺ came from Tabuk. So this is really dishonest and it's unfair. And Shaykh Ibn Jawzi rahimahullah, he said, إِنَّ الْمُفْتِي وَالْعَالِمْ كَالطَّبِيبِ, that the mufti and the scholar is like a doctor. قبل أن يكتب الدواء يسأل عن المريض ويسأل عن موطن المريض. So he says that before he writes the prescription or the medicine or the remedy, he asks about the sick person. He asks about him. And he asks about which country he comes from. And he bases that, the concoction he makes is based on that. So he's saying the mufti is the same way. So when someone comes and asks about, what is prevalent today, like in music in, MTV, and then you tell him, well, the companions sang when they were digging the ditch. It's not a fair comparison, and it's very dishonest. And you can't compare that, with MTV, with the clothing, with the words, with the instruments, with the women, and then you compare it to men who didn't use any instruments and they were not saying any words that were calling it something that was haram. It's not a fair comparison. And of course some of them, and we don't want to waste too much time with this group, they said singing is a form of worship. And, and we obey Allah through this and so on. So Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he tells them how strange, what type of faith, what type of religion, what type of light, what type of insight and guidance and knowledge can be gained from listening to tuneful verses and music in which most of the said is haram. And he continues saying, how can anyone who has the least amount of insight and faith in his heart draw near to Allah and increase his faith by enjoying something which is hated by him, meaning hated by Allah? This doesn't make any sense. So we won't waste time with that. So now we go to, now these people, they have the hadith also. The people who say music is halal. So they have this hadith and they say this is proof that music is halal. So look at the hadith and see how if it supports their argument or not. Aisha radiallahu anha, says Abu Bakr that entered upon her on the day of Eid. And you all know this hadith. And she had two young girls with her who were singing the verses that the Ansar had said on the day of Bu'ath, which is like a battle in war. So Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu entered and he said, أَمِزْمَارُ الشَّيْطَانِ فِي بَيْتِ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم, or the musical instruments, or like the pipe of the shaitan, in the house of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the Prophet ﷺ, he had turned away from them. Now he turned around and he said, leave them alone, O Abu Bakr, for every nation has its Eid, and this is our Eid, the people of Islam. Okay, so can you see now how they're saying this hadith says music is halal? They say, well, it's allowed. The Prophet ﷺ allowed them, so that's proof that it's something that's halal. Okay, then the problem is that this hadith, for them, the problem is that this hadith is actually proof that it's haram. It's not any proof that it's halal. Look at the points. First of all, let's look at the age of the girls, because the ajariya in Arabic has two meanings. It's either a young girl who has not reached the age of puberty, or it's a servant girl. She can be an older girl, but she's still a jariya if she's a servant girl. So which one is the correct one here? Is it just their servants girls, any age, or are the young girls who haven't reached the age of puberty? And the answer are the young girls who haven't reached the age of puberty, because Aisha says there were girls from the Ansar, so the helpers, so they couldn't have been slave girls or servant girls. Obviously they're from the Ansar, so that means they were young girls. So they're young girls, and now we look at the words that they're using. They were from the days of Bu'ath, so they were talking about war and heroics of war. Nothing corrupting, nothing about your eyes and your hair and all that stuff. And then there were no percussion or string instruments. So to compare it with MTV and today's music, it's a crime. And it was halal for them. Aisha radiallahu anha was young at the time. It was halal for these young girls to do that. And that's why the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam turned away from them. So someone might, meaning he wasn't paying attention to them also. So someone might ask then, well, why was he then in the same room? Who can answer that? Why was he in the same room? Muhammad. Okay, close, but there's another reason. Why was he in the same room? Jazakallah khair. It was only one room. The room of Aisha radiallahu anha was 6 feet by 6 feet, with walls of mud and palm stalks, and a ceiling that sometimes would leak in. It had palm leaves and, like a leather hide over it to prevent the rain from coming in. One room is the house, And now we live in these palaces and I want to be alone. There's 2 people in the room. Big living room. I need some me time. Wallahi? Anyways, so Aisha radiallahu anha, another thing was that she was young, and it was never transmitted from her, any hadith or anything, after she reached the age of puberty, except condemnation of singing. Everything we heard from Aisha radiallahu anha after that, after she matured, was condemnation of singing. We look at, this is her son's brother, her brother's son, Afwan, Al-Qasim ibn Muhammad, and she taught him. He gained his knowledge from her. And he used to condemn singing and said that it's not allowed to listen to it. So this is the student of Aisha radiallahu anha. This is proof then that she only did that and it was permissible for her. They were young, and then after that she never said anything except condemning music. Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu, when he comes in, very important, he calls it the flute of the shaitan, the instrument of the shaitan. So the first question is, where do you think he got this name from? Did he make it up? That's the first thing. And was it the norm for Abu Bakr to suggest something like that, to make up something like that in front of the Prophet ﷺ? So that's the first thing. The second thing, so most likely he was aware of this, and he wouldn't tell off, meaning reprimand. He wouldn't reprimand anyone in front of the Prophet ﷺ unless he knew that was wrong. So if he enters something halal is happening in front of the Prophet ﷺ, he's not going to reprimand that person. The fact that he came in and he said that, he knew this was something that was wrong and it was happening in front of the Prophet ﷺ, and he said it. But the exception was made for the day of Eid. So again, what kind of a comparison you're saying? This is a hadith talking about the day of Eid, and now you're listening to it every single day of the year. So even the comparison is incorrect. This was an exception. The Prophet ﷺ said, leave them, Abu Bakr, for today is the day of our Eid. That was the exception. And also, the hadith also shows that it was not the habit of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions to gather and to listen to singing. Proof was how Abu Bakr reacted. I mean, if they were listening to music all the time, you think Abu Bakr would react like that? He wouldn't. So Ibn Qayyim comments on this saying, I'm amazed that you quote as evidence for allowing listening to sophisticated songs. Imagine Ibn Qayyim saying sophisticated songs at his time. So what if he hears our songs now? He said the report which we have mentioned about how 2 young girls were below the age of puberty sang to a young woman on the day of Eid some verses of Arab poetry about bravery in war and other noble characteristics. How can you compare this to that? So this hadith then is far from being evidence that it is halal. So then some other evidences that they used. Listen to this and tell me if this sounds like an evidence that music is halal. It was narrated that Nafi', the freed servant of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhuma, he said Ibn Umar heard a woodwind instrument or some kind of flute or instrument that you blow into, and he put his fingers in his ears and he kept away from that path. So he said to me, because they were walking together, so he heard someone over there playing the flute, he plugged his ears. He said to me, Ya Nafi', can you hear anything? This is after a while. So I said no. So then he took his fingers away from his ears and said, I was with the Prophet ﷺ, and he heard something like this, like a shepherd or someone playing a flute, and he did the same thing. The Prophet ﷺ did the same thing, and then he asked Ibn Umar, can you hear it anymore? Ibn Umar said no, so he unplugged his ears. So, and this is the Sahih hadith in the book of Abu Dawood, rahimahullah. So the argument they say is that he didn't instruct Ibn Umar to put his fingers in his ears. The Prophet ﷺ plugged his ears, but he didn't say plug your ears, Ibn Umar. Abdullah, he didn't say plug your ears. So that means that if it was haram and so on, it would have been, he would have told Ibn Umar to plug his ears, and Ibn Umar would have told Nafi' to plug his ears. So anyone besides Muhammad, can you tell us why this hadith is not proof that music is halal? Why is it not proof that it's halal? Because Shaykh al-Islam ibn Taymiyyah, he mentions how there's a difference between hearing and listening. Hearing and listening. What was, like when you go to a store, you want to buy, something, and you can hear music, but you're just there to purchase whatever you want, and then you're going to leave. You're not sitting there enjoying it and reminiscing, and oh Allah, this is so sweet. You're just listening, you just hear it, okay? So that means the mechanical action of these sound waves hitting into your ears, but it's not registering with you. The Prophet ﷺ didn't want to do the least case, which is just to hear the haram. The least case he didn't want to do. That's why he plugged his ears. But Ibn Umar, he was hearing, he could just hear it, but he wasn't listening to it. Everyone understand the difference? And Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he compares like someone who is, the Quran is being played, but he is not, his intention is not to listen to the Quran, and he's not listening to it. He just hears it. Does he get reward for just hearing it? No. But if he's listening to it, he gets reward. And he says the opposite with music. If you're listening to it, then it's blameworthy, or if you get a sin. But if you just hear it, it's different. And that's why when you enter a restaurant, just as a general advice to the brothers, I've always seen that brothers, when they go into a restaurant, I'll tell you generally restaurant owners, they hate bearded brothers. You know why? Because we're unbelievably rude when we tell them to lower the music. We just come, brothers, lower that music. What's wrong with you? Why don't you just tell them, look, we're having a meeting or we're discussing some issues and we can't hear ourselves think, because could you lower it a little? Brothers make an issue, and there's some restaurants that we go, the minute they see us coming in with our beards and stuff, they hate us because they know they see this bad behavior from us. Please be aware of that. Do not misbehave like that with people, and ask them in a nice way. You don't have to frown. This is haram. This is munkar, and we're stopping it and we're chopping the head off. Relax. Relax a little bit. طيب. So now the hadith we mentioned in Bukhari, which is a sahih hadith, and I'll start to wrap up inshaAllah, or to go faster. The Prophet ﷺ said, there will be in my ummah people who make halal or allow fornication, adultery, and silk and wine and musical instruments. They make them halal, it means they're haram. The first attempt by people who say music is halal, they started to attack this hadith and accuse it of being weak, because, and this is based on a mistake that Ibn Hazm made. And Ibn Hazm, rahimahullah, is a great scholar, but he was not, his field of expertise was not hadith. And it was said by him, or about him by other scholars, that he often erred, made mistakes in his critical assessment of the degrees of a narration and the conditions of the narrators. So Ibn Hazm misunderstood the way it was narrated, and he thought that there was a break in the chain. But all the scholars of hadith, they mentioned that it is sahih, and it has been, the same hadith has been narrated through 9 different places, from 9 different places and 9 different times. And so basically it is not weak. And he has been refuted extensively in many books, and most famously by the scholar Ibn Salah. So the argument that this hadith is weak is a weak argument. Okay? So then they still tried to hang on to this hadith and find some way out. They said that this hadith, the things in this hadith before, which were the fornication, the silk, and the wine, and the music, they said these things are haram because they're combined together. You see? And so music is not haram unless it's accompanied with alcohol and zina and silk. So I wonder, what if music is involved with alcohol and zina and polyester? What happens then? So, and they're claiming music is only haram when you combine it with these 3. And the scholars like Shawkani rahimahullah, he says that would mean zina is not haram unless